What's going on, y'all? Welcome to the ninth episode of the Suckerpunch podcast, the Sunday Suckerpunch podcast. I felt like I needed to do a little bit more of these because just so that this way I could talk about multiple topics, get them out of the way. Just so that this way I don't feel like I'm dropping 20 videos just to kind of get my point across on something. So I figured like this would be a nice format to revisit. Just because it's easy to navigate, and at the same time, I know exactly what I need to do. Um, but we kind of got a couple of topics I want to get into. Of course, I want to talk about the latest coronavirus situation happening at the White House. Wanted to talk a little bit of basketball, with the Lakers. And last but not least, well, second to last but not least, the NFL and what's going on with their situation with COVID-19. And of course, boxing. Of course, boxing. There's a couple fights that got made. I'm really only going to talk about really one fight that I really don't think is really good. And there's more and more hype building around this Teofimo versus Vasyl Lomachenko unification fight that I'm pretty much excited about. And last but not least, Canelo Alvarez showing that he is a man of his word and refiling his lawsuit case now that he's got his paperwork correct. But first and foremost, I just want to let you guys know, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and comment down below if there are topics that you would like for me to cover. Please feel free to drop any videos that you would like for me to leave any sort of rebuttal or reaction to. And of course, just tune in, ask questions, leave comments. As long as you're not being a racist, it's easy to leave comments. um, but before I jump into any of the sports, I did want to talk about Donald Trump and this coronavirus situation. So, before we jump completely into it, let's kind of backtrack to the debate. Um, Me personally, I did not tune into the debate. Normally, the way that I kind of get my news is I watch my Twitter feed to see how this debate is coming along. And I don't just watch a Twitter feed for one person to leave me results. I watch the latest trend of everything and how it comes in. And then the following day, I went back and I watched the debate. And from what I can gather about the debate and how everything kind of turned out, there is a lot that I think is definitely not being, presented. There's a lot of people that are looking at it one way and not looking at it the other way. The first part is I thought Donald Trump's strategy was horrible. His strategy worked 4 years ago when it came to Hillary and attacking her and her family and her business dealings. And the reason why it worked for her, well, the reason why I should say it worked for Donald Trump 4 years ago is because we have already been used to Hillary Clinton being a political figure, from being the first lady to being, I believe Hillary was also a senator. She became Secretary of State. So Hillary Clinton had a lengthy political career that it's easy to attack. And it's much easier to attack that when you don't have a political career. So that's what Donald Trump was able to kind of get away with. There was nothing that Hillary Clinton can do in terms of attacking his political career because he had none. And there was no, other than him failing to get the nomination, when Barack was when Barack was up for re-election, there's nothing else that Donald Trump has contributed in terms of a political career. It's different now because now you have a political career. And now you have a political career with such gaping holes that you allow your opponent to exploit them. And that's exactly what Joe Biden did. Like, this debate was really hard to watch. And also at the same time, when I look at everything and just like its complete, form, this debate was about who could make the least amount of mistakes. And that person was Joe Biden. He made the least amount of mistakes in comparison to Donald Trump. And one of the big reasons why is because you got the huge thing about Donald Trump not denouncing white supremacy. You got the huge thing about Donald Trump not conducting himself properly. And last but not least, you have a huge situation where he exposed himself to people in terms of coronavirus. So when the news drops on Friday that he's tested positive for coronavirus, I'm not surprised considering the level of conduct that he has, shown throughout this entire pandemic. This is somebody who's attacked people for masks. He's attacked people left and right in terms of what the FDA has been able to approve and not approve of. He's attacked the CDC. He's attacked the World Health Organization. So it makes perfect sense why it's gotten to this point where Donald Trump has now contracted coronavirus. Number one, cases are spiking. Cases are spiking in 40 states. New York is slowly spiking, and I'm kind of afraid, mostly because I didn't like being in the full shutdown that we were in. It's a very traumatic experience to be in, especially when COVID-19 affected my family directly. It's just not somewhere you want to be in terms of a headspace and a mental state and a physical space. Number two, I have some type of normalcy to my life, and I need people to get it together and realize that this little bit of normalcy is kind of what's getting people like through this. There are people being evicted from their homes. There are people that are losing their jobs. There are people who have lost loved ones. There are people who have lost spouses. So the idea that you can still have this sort of mind frame about something like this is absurd and it's asinine. So it's not out of the realm that they got it. Secondly, there's a shit ton of people now that are testing positive for it that have been at the White House. You have so many people that got together for this event that they took place to present the nomination of the new justice that Trump wants to get through the door. And you're seeing six, seven, eight people, prominent Republican figures now test positive for coronavirus. And they don't know if they're going to make it. That's the thing about this pandemic is once you catch coronavirus, you don't know if you are going to make it. And that is scary. And throughout this entire process, and I know a lot of my fellow brothers in the Lions Den box community is there's also a lot of skepticism around this. And the reason why there's so much skepticism around this is because of a few things. Number one, I'm looking at the timeline and how everything adds up, and it's not adding up to me. Especially because the White House is saying one thing. You have sources and leaks coming out of the White House saying completely the opposite. They're saying, oh, he's mild, he's stable, he's showing minor symptoms. And on the other side, they're saying he needed a breathing machine. He was showing signs of hallucination in which COVID-19 does affect your brain function, but Trump's already a crazy motherfucker. Um, and of course, you start to also see the medical reports. And this is the part that like really like definitely like makes me feel very skeptical about this entire situation. They gave him 8 milligrams of a trial experimental drug that has not been cleared by the FDA. Now, I know we live in a society where we're not the best at math, we're not the best at conversions. Um, so I'll use a more personal example to kind of give you some thought around it. Now, back in 2016, I had contracted a very deadly bacterial infection. And I think I more than likely got it like from just being in the gym and not wiping down a piece of equipment. And for me, that bacterial infection attacked both my legs. So this bacterial infection is called MRSA, MRSA. And if you want to get some more, detail around how it works and what happens, I definitely advise you to Google it. And MRSA is one of the big reasons why I feel like I've been able to navigate COVID-19, and kind of, apply what I've usually done to my everyday life pretty easily because I'm that kind of way in the gym, especially now. But it's a bacterial infection that kind of seeps into your skin and gets in underneath your skin into like the base layers and then gets into your blood. And then it starts to build up mucus and walls. And like there are certain insects that can give you this as well. Spiders are like one of the more common, type of insects that if you get like a specific spider bite, it can later turn into it. But also it's almost like a staph infection on steroids. And even like one of my good friends, like he just dealt with it right now. He didn't know what he's dealing with, and I was like, "Yo, go to the ER, go to CityMD, go get that checked out." Because you're explaining about pain in your muscles, and you're seeing like signs of some type of wart that's like forming, and it's got a head. Go get it checked out because what could you may think be a staph infection could be a lot worse. And luckily for him, it ended up just being a staph infection. But for people like me, I had I had been rushed to the ER. Like my dad took me to the ER because I was still living at home at the time. And I remember waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and this had been 3 days after, I had been really trying to battle this thing and get it out of my system. I had already been seen at a City MD. They gave me Bactrim. It was like 1,000 milligrams of an antibiotic, which just does horrible shit to your body. And that was 1,000 milligrams, equal to 1 gram. Taking that made me feel like I almost felt like dying. And then when I was rushed to the hospital, they gave me 4 bags of IV fluid because I was massively dehydrated. My blood pressure was something like 180 over 140, which in many cases can put you almost in stroke levels. I had a temperature that was notching over 106 degrees. And for a lot of the personnel, they were like, we need to cool you down immediately before we do anything. And they had to admit me right away. I got 4 bags of fluid and I could feel my fever coming down. And I felt stronger because I was hydrated, but I was in a ton of pain. My legs were bleeding out. And then I ended up going into 2 surgeries. And then I'd also hit the point where I couldn't take any sort of antibiotic, pill to kind of relieve it. I had to get, an injection and have antibiotics flowing through me through an injection. And that was 500 milligrams, zero point 0.5 grams. And I was on that routinely for 10 days. And then 3 days that I would go in and I would have, the gauze that was in my leg because they can't stitch you up after a surgical drainage. They have to let tissue grow underneath your skin. And they had to pull that out and then rechange it. But they would also give me dosages of painkillers. And the most that they would give me would be 2 to 3 grams at most in terms of a painkiller in order to sedate me in terms of medicine. So the fact that you gave the president of the United States 8 grams of something that we don't even know the side effects to, and based on the company that has presented, the drug as a potential future vaccine, 8 grams is 3 times the dosage that they've been doing in trials. Like this really it makes me super confused. And then we get the news that yesterday he got administered another trial experimental drug of a similar dosage. So so they have been medicating him like no tomorrow in order to try to figure out how they can get this thing kind of out of the system. And the reason why it makes me skeptical is because what physician would honestly, in their opinion, let you take 16 grams or almost 16 grams of an experimental drug? I don't even smoke 8 grams of weed in my blunt, let alone try to take 8 grams of an experimental drug. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's mixture of this, a mixture of that, a mixture of this. I'm like, dude, it's a trial experimental drug for a virus that we haven't been able to solve. Why aren't we using the same methods that doctors are doing right now in the hospitals? And it's also, in my opinion, one of the biggest and most scrutinized things because no American is going to get this type of treatment. There are people that you have been turned away just because they feel like your oxygen levels aren't in the danger zone. And personally, that's what happened to my brother-in-law. He got turned away from being intubated because they felt his blood oxygen levels were on par and that he could fight it, he could beat it. And then 3 days later, he was dead. It's a big spit in the face to this healthcare system where the same guy who's getting this amount of treatment is suing to take away preconditions from everybody. And the worst part about it is COVID-19 is going to give a lot of people who had it a lot of preconditions. There are a lot of people who are going to suffer from the fact that their lungs are going to be damaged even if they beat it. And the only people that could really kind of get away with having to get this and then move over it are asymptomatic people. But there are people who, even if they have like even the most mild ones, they're going to be suffering for years and upon years. It's going to be no different from, the 9/11 survivors who've been suffering from since that day in terms of their health. And the government doesn't give a fuck about these people, you know? And the one mistake I would say that Biden has made, and that's something that he should really reconsider, is pulling his negative ads. Because to me, if the White House is telling me that the president is in good shape and he's doing this, doing that, keep them ads rolling, baby. You know? There's nothing that right now can stop Joe Biden's momentum other than something like this situation where Donald Trump is seeing himself lose in the polls, continue to lose bits and bits of his base, and at the same time, nobody's really garnering any sort of sympathy for him. And this is a way for him to kind of cop out. Let alone the fact that you got Melania leaking tapes about her not giving a shit about kids in cage or Christmas, which targets two sets of people. Number one, people who are those who have been against ICE and against this hardcore strict immigration policy, and evangelicals who are a direct root of his base. And if you pissing off evangelicals saying that you don't give a fuck about Christmas, it's gonna be tough for you to keep that vote. If I was Biden, I would just release that audio of her saying "fuck Christmas" and put photos of him, you know, doing Catholic Christian type activities. And that what makes matters worse. And I know the Too Raw for TV. I watch Too Raw's political, videos a lot, and I hope that maybe one day we could talk about politics together. But I remember him talking about these polls, and I was looking up these polls, especially in these states where a lot of Senate Republicans are sweating. And a lot of them right now, when you look at what they're doing, they could lose. Like you have states like South Carolina where Jamie Harrison is absolutely embarrassing Lindsey Graham in every opportunity that he has, and he's pulled ahead of the polls. You've got states like Texas where the overall population is moving Texas into a purple state where they can flip. And of course, you've got so many other senators who are on the hot seat. Susan Collins is going to lose her seat, whether she wants to vote for a justice or not. She's going to lose her seat. Arizona, whoever's there, Mark Kelly's going to win that seat. He's got a projected landslide victory, and there's no real Dem seat that's really on the hot seat right now. Even in Congress, there's no real Dem seat that's on the hot seat right now. What does that tell you? That means that people are seeing Republicans for the bullshit that they've been doing. And me, I'm an independent voter. So I have no party affiliation to each, but I can speak on each situation. Um, this is probably going to be ugly come November 3rd in terms of an election result. And I'm trying my best to see, well, what's the path that Trump can take? His stride going into the election 4 years ago and his stride going into this election, two completely different things. You got your campaign manager that you fired that is under investigation for lying to Congress. You got half your support like catching a pandemic, a virus that they don't know the solution to. And as much of the ads that you're putting out over and over and over and over again, they're not strategic. None of the ads have been strategic. You know, you got what's his name over down in Alabama. Can't remember his name. But Doug Jones, yes, Doug Jones is his name. Doug Jones is up for re-election in the Senate. He won the special election against Roy Moore, that fucking pedophile. Um, he is running for re-election against Tommy Tuberville. And Tommy Tuberville is what you call a guy who keeps failing into jobs. Tommy Tuberville was a college football coach who failed at every single pit stop he made. And the one thing about Alabama and what Alabama loves is Alabama loves America, but you know what Alabama loves more than America? College football. And you know what they love even more so? They love winning. And you know what Tommy Tuberville is? A quitter. And he's coached Auburn, and he's a quitter. And for Doug Jones to put that ad about him being a quitter right smack dab in the fucking middle of an SEC televised national game, just fucking brilliant. You're not seeing that type of strategy take place on the Republican side. And that's why it's going to be really difficult seeing a path for Republicans to remain in power in some aspect of government other than having the overwhelming majority favorite on the justice panel, which if they lose to the Democrats, you can see Joe Biden expand the Supreme Court justices as much as 11 all the way to 13. And if he gets to 13, he gets to promote 4 liberal judges. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But those are my views on Trump and his whole coronavirus situation. I did want to talk about the NBA Finals. The NBA Finals have felt really different this year. I think it's different because there's no real slander, if that makes sense. Every year I love the finals because there's always some type of slander. And the only real slander that you can find is in two situations: Kyle Kuzma and Tyler Hero, and Eric Spoeltra and Frank Vogel. And it's real obvious the Kuzma Hero angle, mostly because there's a really, really, really fine young lady that has dated both of them, and she is in the bubble, and she is with Tyler Hero. And I just don't. I just want to see how that matchup works. Where if is Tyler Hero going to use this to his advantage to talk shit to Kyle Kuzma, or is Kyle Kuzma going to use that as an advantage to talk shit to Tyler Hero? It's like very intriguing. And I know right now there's no real advantage right now because both of them have played very similarly through these first two games. And there's still a lot more games to go in the series. I know a lot of people think that the Lakers are just going to sweep them right away, and it very well could happen. But I also believe as well when it comes to this situation is, Miami has been a team all season long that has grinded through and found ways to get over tough situations. And going into the season, I told a lot of my close, associates, especially when it comes to fantasy basketball, which, I participate in, and just like shit talking with your boys, because, we all watch basketball. I've told people for a long time, Miami is a team that is a sleeper. They've got one of the most well-rounded teams, most well-rounded benches, and they have a dog mentality. They play 100% on both ends of the floor. And you saw that during the season. They didn't back down from any of the top seeds, and they had one of the tougher paths to the NBA Finals. They had to go through an Indiana Pacer team, which on paper doesn't really look good, but if you look at their pieces in their game, you would think that they're one of the top teams in the East. The Bucks, self-explanatory. You gentlemen swept the Bucks. The Celtics, one of the best young teams in the league, beat them in six. So it's not, it's not unheard of to see what this Miami team has done. In my opinion, they've shocked a lot of people. And especially now, it's a really, really tough situation when it comes to the fact that you got Bam Adebayo, who's probably not going to play until game four, and he's had a bad shoulder. And I think if Miami goes down 0-3, I don't think they play Bam in game four. I don't think you're going to risk trying to go back to next season and pick up the pieces with Bam as if he goes into game four and he re-hurts himself. It'd be the same situation like Kevin Durant. Even though those are different injuries, it's just the same perspective. Uh, and then you have Goran Dragic, who has reinvented himself in the bubble. He was kind of a player during the season that started, then was on the bench, then found a way to contribute from off the bench, and then he just was amazing in the bubble and through the playoffs. And for him to tear his plantar fascia is probably one of the most heartbreaking injuries. And for a lot of people who don't really know the thought process around how that happens, I've I've ruptured my plantar fascia before. I haven't torn it, but I've ruptured it. And when I tell you that rupturing it is probably next to MERS is probably the most painful experience I can go through because it's the muscle that's on the bottom of your foot. And the thing about the bottom of your foot is that those muscles are the muscles that you repeatedly day after day break down and wear in when you're walking. And when you tear it, when you go to sleep, those muscles kind of shrink back down into their natural place. And then you do the same thing the next day. You get up the next day, you start walking around for a little bit, you stretch those muscles out. But when you tear that plantar fascia, it doesn't heal that when you go to sleep the same way. Now you have what kind of feels like this massive fucking knot that's underneath your foot. And the worst part about it is the only real way to get your foot to get accustomed to it is breaking the fucking knot down and to apply pressure to the bottom of your foot. And it's one of the most painful things to go through. Like I remember having plantar fascia, and in like stores you get like those. If you've ever like run like a grocery store or like ran like a store where you like print out receipts, those receipt rolls that you get. I would steal those from like places that I knew that I can get them. Not that I was just like going into a store and stealing them, but I would get those and I would put it on the floor and I would step and I would roll my foot out with it. And it's one of the most painful things to work through. And luckily for me, what ended up working out was the fact that I was attributing to plantar fascia because I got it from Muay Thai and I had to fix it through a chiropractor. And what I mean by fix it through a chiropractor was I had to adjust and get my posture to where it needs to be in order to take the pressure off those parts. And when you do that, you can actually like it can actually really help with how you walk and how your feet are and how you do things. So that's how I was able to figure out how to get around plantar fascia. Goran Dragic tore his shit. I can only imagine what it feels like for him to know that he may never take a step on that foot for the next 6 months. Like it's that bad. And he could potentially find himself in a position to ultimately end up not really being able to do things correctly moving forward. Like he's gonna have to take a lot of time to rehab it, and I know they want to get him back out there, but it doesn't make any sense giving him a Toradol shot in his foot to numb him and then trying to put him out there to compete. It's just not worth it. So like it's tough for Miami, and on the flip side, you got the Lakers who are peaking right now. I think Anthony Davis deserves to be Finals MVP. I know a lot of people want to put a lot into LeBron in terms of what he's been able to do this year, especially at his age, and the fact that he still managed to be this dominant and in year 17. I think that's more important than him being 35 years old. I think the fact that he's still been this dominant in year 17. How many athletes in year 17 can be as dominant as they are? The only real one that I could think about is Serena Williams and Floyd Mayweather, to be honest. Like in terms of just being the athlete and just being dominant. Like there's some athletes who play 20 years in a sport, but I'm talking about being at the top tier in terms of dominance. The only other athlete that I can see possibly entering that stratosphere is maybe Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi as they kind of get older because they're still two of the best football players on the planet. Um, and I know a lot of people want to say like Tom Brady, but let's be real. Tom Brady has worked well within Belichick's system, which is why he's been able to continue to be at this pace. LeBron's doing this with a team that they just formed together this year, and he's managed to reinvent himself as a. LeBron James is shooting from 35 out with complete confidence that he can make it, and he's making these shots. If you would have told me back in, I want to say 2011, that LeBron would be taking 3 steps from inside the half court and pulling up from three, I'd be like, "You out of your mind." LeBron's game is totally to lower his shoulder and barrel his way into the lane and try to get contact or draw foul and connect or try to take you off of the post and post you up and take a jump shot. I would never think that LeBron would be a guy who would feel so comfortable at the 3 point line and beyond the 3 point line. And he is. And you can't take that away from him. I know a lot of people like they love to bring up the Jordan debate. And for me, Michael Jordan will always be the greatest basketball player, in my opinion. Always be the greatest basketball player. And at the same time, I can appreciate like that LeBron James is going to be one of the 5 best basketball players of all time. And for many people and how they kind of go about navigating this, the other situation that is definitely not being spoken about more of is Eric Spoeltra versus Frank Vogel. And I'm kind of shocked that people have left this under the radar. Eric Spoelstra has outcoached Frank Vogel throughout his entire career of them being in the Eastern Conference. Every time Miami matched up with Indiana, Miami always pretty much had the edge moving forward. And for many people, including Frank Vogel, I'm pretty sure Frank Vogel probably is the happiest person on that Lakers team because he's finally getting to watch his team dismantle and dominate Eric Spoelstra's team and do it in the biggest stage of them all, the NBA Finals. And he's doing it with Eric Spoelstra's former player. And he's doing it versus an organization that LeBron James, we already know he has beef with Pat Riley. So that's why like everything kind of all coming together is pretty, it's so ironic. And also at the same time, you also got to look into uh, the fact that Jimmy Butler has proven so many of his doubters wrong. And I don't want people to look at this finals that he's in as a way to take away all the credit that he's had leading up to this moment. Everybody completely like said horrible things about him when he left Philadelphia to go to Miami. They felt that he was going on a team that wasn't going to perform better than them, that didn't even have that didn't even think that they could make the playoffs. That what's their culture like? Who are their players? And Jimmy has become the nucleus of that team. He's the identity of this Miami team. And because he's the identity of this Miami team, I don't want people to take away from what he's accomplished this year because they haven't played really well through the first two games. There's a lot of variables that go into this. And I think had you had a fully healthy Miami team going into this, I think they would push the Lakers to 6 games. But I also believe that because they're missing so much and they're missing probably their most important player in Bam Adebayo, it's going to be tough for them to kind of do this. I know when we talked about Bam Adebayo and how he matched up against the other big men in the league, when it came to the Bucks, I told people, I said, "Yo, Bam is the Giannis stopper," because Giannis isn't the type of guy that's going to take you out on the 3-point line and shoot. He'll probably try to work himself into the mid range at times. But Giannis's ability to power his way or to run the full length of the court and utilize his athleticism, it didn't work with Bam. And the reason why is because Bam is the kind of guy who's used to being that defensive anchor, and he suddenly learned how to both be a playmaker and distribute the ball because I think he had like 3 triple doubles this year, and at the same time he's been able to score and be able to attack the basket and get offensive rebounds. And for Giannis, he couldn't barrel his way into Bam, and it showed. Going up against Anthony Davis, totally different story. It was the same situation that when people brought up the Lakers and the Nuggets matchup, and they were talking about Jokic and how did Jokic fare off against Davis. I said Jokic on the offensive end, they're both going to do really well. On the defensive end, there is no way that Jokic was going to be able to guard Anthony Davis for 48 minutes. But Anthony Davis could guard Jokic for 48 minutes. And that was the big difference. And I said to a lot of people, I said, watch Anthony Davis turn Jokic into barbecue chicken on a defensive end. And I told people. And it's the same thing with Bam. Bam, as good as he is, he's not the kind of guy that can, you know, guard a big man on the perimeter. And the thing about Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis doesn't get enough credit for his perimeter game. And that's why I think why he's going to be finals MVP, because he's showing you that he can score on all areas of the court, play defense, attack the basket. And I felt that he was also the defensive player of the year over Giannis. And I know people talk about the defensive advanced stats of Giannis, but Davis was second to him. But Davis also had more blocks than him, and I believe more steals than him. And his averages were higher. So for Anthony Davis, I think this is his coming out party, and I think this is the moment that he's wanted to be in. And I look at how parallel his career has been with LeBron James in terms of being drafted first overall into an organization that's not really known for winning at that time and doing his best to turn them into winners, and then seeing the incompetence of those organizations and leaving for the team that has had a winning culture and to take them back to a level where they've been to before. And I think that's why Anthony Davis is going to win MVP based on the fact of where his season was last year to where it was this year. It's a complete 180, you know? So those are my thoughts on that. Did want to talk about the NFL and their COVID situation. Of course, Cam Newton tested positive. You got 12 Tennessee Titans staff members testing positive. You got the Chiefs backup quarterback testing positive, and you're starting to see more and more cases rise. And ultimately, all this tells me is one thing that many people are avoiding, and that is the NFL needed a bubble. And if the NFL had a bubble, they would have had just about the similar season as to the Lakers. Well, not to the Lakers, but I should say the NBA. The NBA spent $150 million setting up the bubble in terms of how they were going to be able to track everything. And you haven't seen any high profile player in the bubble catch coronavirus. You haven't seen a high profile staff member catch it. You've seen them be very stern with players who have violated rules. And you don't see that with the NFL. You've seen them fine coaches for not wearing masks during games, which is one thing. But I mean, like, the NFL has enough money to put a bubble. You have enough money to put yourself in a state that has enough land in order to have teams practice in X, Y, and Z. Or even if you wanted to do an NFC bubble and an AFC bubble, like you can do something like that. Or if you wanted to do, a situation where you take 4 or 5 states, put them in a neutral zone, and then put these teams in specific states so that this way everything that's going on. Yes, it'll cost a lot of money. Yes, it involves more personnel than the NBA. But guess what? You wouldn't find yourself in a situation right now where you have to reschedule one of the best games on the schedule between the Chiefs and the Patriots. This year has been a really good year in terms of stylistic matchups, black quarterbacks going up against each other, which is like unheard of how many matchups that we've seen. And you get something like this, which takes away another great matchup between Patrick Mahomes and Cam Newton. And honestly, like I feel bad for Cam because Cam's been on a tear this year. He's been proving all his haters wrong. And I know he's sticking to his 86-day vow because that's how many nights that he went, unsigned. And on the other side, I'm also laughing at the Patriots fans because a lot of the ones that were super backing up Jared Stidham, you now have the chance to have Jared Stidham prove that all that hype that you gave him was correct. Don't let Jared Stidham fuck up. And ultimately, when I look at the NFL, it doesn't seem like they didn't have any backup to this. Like there's nothing. Like with the NBA, and like you can attest this based on like watching the vlogs of the players who were in the bubble. These guys can't even go anywhere without. They can't even go to, a common hall without checking in with a wristband so that they know where they are. And I know that's kind of seems very authoritative, when you look at it from a landscape, but this proved that it worked. And if the NBA is trying to restart next year, I think you'll see something similar with a bubble in terms of like how they go throughout the season, especially if COVID is still lingering around, by the time that they want to start, which is I think around Christmas Day or into New Year's next year. But when it comes to the NFL, it just shows that you guys didn't have a backup plan. And NFL players aren't like baseball players or NBA players where they get lifetime insurance. These guys, it just depends on how many years you've been in the league to determine how your insurance plan works. And if you're a rookie and you catch this and you can't even play, you're not a guy who's going to be getting insurance for the rest of your life. You might have to take out a separate insurance policy just for something like this. So it's really like it. And I personally, I don't want to say that I feel bad for the NFL players, mostly because you guys negotiated this in your CBA and you guys voted for it. So I'm not going to have any sympathy for you. I'm going to criticize the league, but I'm not going to kind of back you guys up. I'm not. Um, but I hope that Cam makes he quarantines and he's asymptomatic and he doesn't show signs, and I hope that he tests negative, by the time that, these next 2 games kind of go about their way. And I hope that, he's back on the field, he continues to produce and he continues to work hard during his quarantine. Um, and last but not least, we got some boxing. I don't know what was the point of making Danny Jacobs fight Gabriel Rosado. Honestly, I feel like asking like, especially like the zone, like, do you think fans are a joke to you? Is like the question that I had. Why would you put Daniel Jacobs in the ring with Gabriel Rosado? You have so many other options that you can explore, and you chose Gabriel Rosado. You can offer up a rematch to Canelo. The first fight was a good fight. I don't think people wouldn't mind seeing it again. You got Gennady Golovkin. I felt Jacobs won that fight. A lot of people, not maybe the overwhelming majority, but a lot of people felt the same. You got Demetrius Andrade. You got Billy Joe Saunders. You could even say, hey, Charlo, we'll even overpay you to fight one fight. No strings attached. We'll revisit that. Even though that type of deal didn't work out last time, we'll revisit it. But you chose Gabriel Rosado. And I don't have anything against Gabriel Rosado, but Gabriel Rosado, his career has just always been we like his attitude, we like his fighting style, but he gets beat the fuck up. That has relatively always been Gabe Rosado's kind of, MO as a fighter. And I don't and unless he magically develops the ability to punch like Mike Tyson, I don't think he's gonna do anything to Danny Jacobs. That's just me personally. So I felt kind of disrespected when they came out with that announcement that they made that fight. I'm also disrespected at Devin Haney fighting Yuriorkis Gamboa. What the fuck is he doing fighting Gamboa? And to make matters worse, you got Canelo refiling his lawsuit. And the big reason why Canelo had to refile his lawsuit is because number one, Canelo Alvarez is technically an immigrant, which is the first part. And what he didn't do in his original paperwork was he didn't um, kind of put the right information in terms of who he was suing. He's kind of suing everybody all at once, and that kind of doesn't work in terms of like logistics. You gotta sue a party and where they're from. The zone may not be based in Los Angeles the way that Golden Boy is, so you can't sue the zone in Golden Boy and then file it with the DLA county. You gotta make sure that you're filing these lawsuits correctly. So I think now you have Canelo, who's pretty much he's figured out the logistics to his paperwork. He's suing the zone, he's suing Golden Boy, and he's suing Oscar De La Hoya. And I think Canelo, for who he is and the amount of money that he's made in his career, I think he's perfectly fine with sitting on the sidelines and letting this happen. Because if he was willing to do this, that means that he knows that his contract is something that's not up for dispute. And if his contract's not up to dispute and you have a judge that rules in his favor, he knows that he can get that money and he could fight a couple of random fights. Or if the judge allows him to have um, a temporary position where he can fight and not be obligated to be within his contract. And the only thing is that he has to just make sure that the event itself that he continues to pay a promotional fee, and maybe the zone it only has to put up a small percentage of his contract, but they have no say so of his opponents. I think you'll see something like that kind of happen. But with Canelo and what he's doing as far as just he just seems like he's in a position where he's okay with being on the sidelines and getting this resolved in terms of the court system. And for Oscar De La Hoya, you got to be sweating. Canelo Alvarez is your company, whether you like it or not. For the zone, this is the most important fighter on your network, on your on your streaming service, that on your platform. He is he is the Michael Jordan of your platform. So if you are not abiding by the things that you said that you were going to do, that is going to be a problem, you know? And it's partially your fault. If you knew that if you had a vision and plan as far as like who you were going to get on this channel, on the channels, and who you were going to have, getting these fights and how the opponents were going to be lined up, you would have scheduled that way. One of the biggest reasons why Showtime had a massive success with Floyd Mayweather in terms of generating revenue and X, Y, and Z is they didn't just treat Floyd like he was a boxer. They treated him as if he was family to them. And that's why you kind of see Floyd, he's never said anything bad about Showtime. And it's not because, they paid him a shit ton of money. It's because of how he was able to work everything out. You know, I'm pretty sure Showtime probably saw a couple of the opponents that they had, and they were just like, Floyd, this is not going to work. And he probably phrased it in a way that said, this is not going to work because you're not going to make that much money from it, as opposed to we are not going to make it that much money for it. I don't see the zone doing that because you locked Canelo into a massive deal where he probably didn't care about it because there's no upside following his fights. There's no extra money being added onto it. For Floyd, he was getting so much extra money that he probably looked at Showtime and just like, you know what, you're right. Let's try to pick out another opponent. You know, many of us thought that Floyd was going to fight Pacquiao in his last fight with Showtime or finish up his Showtime contract and fight Pacquiao. He worked it into as his fifth fight. He fought Canelo Alvarez in his what was it? His second contractual fight. He fought Canelo Alvarez. Many people didn't think he was going to fight Canelo until the sixth fight as well. So for Floyd and Showtime, they understood that relationship, which is why they were able to make a lot of money. And then Floyd managed to also put them in an even better position financially when he fought Conor McGregor. Because I said this many years ago about the Conor McGregor fight. I should say many years ago, many months ago. Is the Pacquiao and Mayweather fight was a joint promotion between HBO and Showtime. The Conor McGregor fight was all Showtime. So that fee that Showtime gets to collect was at least double the number than what they made from Pacquiao because they didn't have to share that revenue. I think they shared 52% of the revenue with HBO. They got to keep 100% of the satellite revenue from the McGregor fight. And that's why you see that Showtime's been able to still continue to put fights on. And where's HBO right now? Where's the Zone going to be in a couple years? And unless they're able to find a buyer that's willing to take over, their platform, because you got two promoters. One of them's a one of them's a cokehead who's getting sued by his best fighter, and another one has pissed away the large majority of the budget that he was given because he overpaid for specific fights. And now your company's so far in the red that you've increased subscription memberships. You have nothing really else to offer to a niche fan base. And while your product is doing well in other parts of the world, boxing isn't their focus. Their focus is other sports. And you can't compete with that here in the US because the four major sports, what you have in terms of a revenue budget, in terms of what you're going to get and subscribers and what you get, these sports get like 10 times that amount because of just they've got marketable athletes. They've built up their base. They've got a robust production team. You guys don't have that. You guys think that you have it, but you don't. So with Canelo Alvarez, he wants to get out, and I don't blame him. I wish it was a lot easier for him to navigate, but it's not. Um, and I think Canelo is willing to either sit on the bench or to get exactly what he wants, which is to fight who he wants. And that's really nobody's fault except for Golden Boy for lying to Canelo Alvarez just so that they can get this deal, so that they can get funding for a lot of their other fights. And it's a huge issue for the zone because you got played. I gave John Skipper a lot of credit going into this thing, but you may be worse than fucking Ken Hirschman. Jesus. So we got a big fight coming up. You got Vasyl Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez. And it's not an undisputed fight because we all know that Bob Arum did not want to put Vasyl Lomachenko in the ring with Devin Haney. Understandably, you didn't want to put him in the ring with the younger, fresher fighter. So you lobbied the WBC to give him the franchise label, which takes away the championship obligations from the champion. So I don't consider Vasyl Lomachenko to be the WBC champion. I consider Devin Haney to be the true champion. So if people are running around calling Vasyl Lomachenko the undisputed champion, should he win this fight, I'm not going to call him the undisputed champion because an undisputed champion defends his title against whoever is there, and you chose not to. But on the flip side, when you look at Teofimo Lopez, I'm a huge Teofimo Lopez fan, and not just be, and it may just be because he's from Brooklyn, and I gotta hold it down for Brooklyn fighters. But one of the biggest reasons why I'm a huge fan of Teofimo Lopez is because I think he's one of the most well-rounded young fighters that has a long, you know, he has a long, path to greatness, in my opinion. And I think he's a guy that you can see him fight, one more division up at 140 and potentially maybe some point later in his career take a fight at 147 where he goes from being, the heavy-handed, fast counterpuncher to being, a technician in the ring. He has that type of style to me. So when I see how this fight is being built up, Teofimo Lopez, he's building himself up. He's talking. He's getting people involved in the fight, and I love that. But I also feel that I think this is I think this is where Vasyl Lomachenko's time starts to come to an end. And for a lot of people, there have been overwhelming favorites of Vasyl Lomachenko. They feel like he's unbeatable because of X, Y, and Z, and so on and so forth. And for me, I've picked guys to beat Vasyl Lomachenko, and he's beaten them. you know? So I can't sit there and tell you that I have been right this entire time about Vasyl Lomachenko because I haven't been. But what I will and I can tell you is the same Vasyl Lomachenko that we've seen at 135 is not the same Vasyl Lomachenko that we've seen at 126 and 130. And it also might have to be because of the weight and because of his age and the fact that, he's taken shots that we don't see him take. We've seen him take shots against Jose Pedraza and Jorge Linares, and even as recently as Luke Campbell. I don't really consider Anthony Crolla to be the kind of guy that gave him anything in terms of like a style that was different in the ring. But we've seen like those are the three big fights that we've seen Vasyl Lomachenko in. And granted, he's won those fights, whether it be him getting the stoppage over Linares in a close fight or him just having to outlast Pedraza. And you also have the Luke Campbell fight where he managed to separate himself as the fight kind of went along. But Teofimo Lopez presents Vasyl Lomachenko with something different, in my opinion, in terms of a style matchup. He is a counterpuncher, and not only is a counterpuncher, but he's also a quick guy who can fight on the inside and fight from mid range. And Vasyl hasn't really fought somebody who can fight on both those levels. He's fought guys that have fought on the inside, and these guys have fought at mid range. He's fought inside guys like Nicholas Walters. He's fought inside guys like Luke Campbell, and he's fought rangy guys like Guillermo Rigondeaux, and he's fought rangy guys like Jose Pedraza. But he hasn't fought a guy who can do both. And he's going to have to fight that type of guy now. And he's also fighting a guy who's much younger and much fresher than him, and a guy who has not withered or showed much, how to put it, much of a disadvantage in his fights to where you're saying, cool, this is what we can exploit X, Y, and Z. So I don't think it's going to be an easy fight for Lomachenko. I think a lot of people are overlooking Teofimo Lopez just because he's not that experienced. But just because he's not that experienced doesn't mean that he's not going to be able to compete at this level. I told so many people that Teofimo Lopez was just going to annihilate Richard Commey. And it was like, nah, Commey's, he's a big heavy-handed puncher. He's a big lightweight. There's no way that he's just going to go in and just beat him. And he dusted that nigga. So the idea that Teofimo Lopez can't go in and have similar success with Vasyl Lomachenko is something that you should definitely not, underrate. He is one of the best young fighters in the world. And I think for him, I am going to pick him by a late stoppage against Vasyl Lomachenko. And I think it's mostly because Vasyl Lomachenko has always used his pace to outmaneuver guys. But I don't think he's fought a guy who's willing to keep up with his pace at this type of level. He's fought guys who've been able to keep up with his pace, and he's found a way to outdo them. And you kind of see that with guys like Pedraza and Jorge Linares, where these guys just kept up with him the whole fight, and you saw these guys kind of building aspects of momentum as the fight went on, but then they kind of just didn't have the gas tank to continue it. And I think you're going to see Teofimo Lopez outdo those guys in his performance. So that's how I wanted to wrap it up. I'll probably hit you guys next Sunday with another one. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave any comments below. Once again, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If there's any topics you'd like me to cover, please email them below. Well, not email, but please comment on them below. And of course, if you wanted to reach out to me directly, you can reach out to me at fightcritic@gmail.com. And everybody enjoy your Sunday. Be safe out there. Wear a mask. Take your vitamins. Spend time with your family if you can. Keep yourselves involved in each other's lives, and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.